Hey, it's Christine Faulkner, Elk Grove Living Trust lawyer, Sacramento will lawyer with Cava and Faulkner. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of the Daily with Christine. I'm actually standing outside my front door and there's bees buzzing all around me. So it's a beautiful day. But today we're going to talk about why it is so important that after you create a plan, after you create a trust, that you not only make sure that you have specific instruction on how to title all of your assets, but that you double check and triple check that your assets have been titled correctly. So this video is for you if you have created a trust and you're not sure if the assets that you have are titled correctly, or your beneficiary designations are complete and up to date, and you don't even really know what happens if those things haven't been done. So if that is you, then definitely stay tuned, because we're going to talk about the importance of making sure that all of your assets are titled correctly, titled beneficiary designations, but also why it's so important to double and triple check that and what happens when you get it wrong. So let's get started. So you've taken that big step of creating a trust, because you know that if you don't and something happens to you, that your assets could end up in probate. So it's so important that your real estate be titled in your name as trustee of your trust. Otherwise, it's not protected by the trust. And if you die, your house, even though you've taken the time to create a trust, your real estate could all end up going through probate. And you know, the quick and dirty on probate is that it's going to cost you about 5% of the fair market value of those assets, and it's going to be a long delay, and the people that you want to get the assets may not get them. So enough said about that. So important that your real estate always be titled correctly in your name or your names as trustees of your trust. What about your bank accounts? Well, mostly your bank account should also be titled in your name as trustee of your trust, because if you have more than $166,000 in titled assets that are not in your trust, those assets will too go through probate. But sometimes people don't want to put a bank account or a specific bank account into the trust. And I've worked with a lot of people recently who have their Social Security going on auto deposit into an account. And if they have to change title, it's going to mean they have to get a new bank account, and it's going to be a whole huge hassle. And they don't want to be dealing with Social Security, the Social Security Administration, definitely not right now during COVID, because it could take months to get that all straightened out. So if you have a bank account where you do not have the account titled in your name as trustee, then you definitely should have a pay on death beneficiary. And I generally recommend that if you're going to name a beneficiary for a bank account and you have a trust, that it should be your trust. That way, no matter what happens, even if you have no beneficiaries left, the account will never end up going through probate, because you actually have named the trust, and the trust should always exist. Therefore, you have a beneficiary, and you have good news. You don't end up ever having to have that account go through court. It will be distributed to someone as is set forth in your trust. So what about the rest of the accounts that you have, the type of assets that you have? If you have a pension, usually pensions don't have beneficiary designations because they basically end when you pass away, or if you have a spouse, they end when your spouse passes away, so you can't really give them to anyone. But your retirement accounts, kind of depending on what your plan says, will dictate who is the beneficiary. So that is beyond the scope of this discussion, because that can get real specific as to what type of plan you have dictates who you're going to name. But if you're married and you have children that are not minors, who are maybe in their late 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, that you fully trust and you know would make smart choices with the assets, then you're probably going to name your spouse as the primary beneficiary, and then your kids. If you have minor children, you are not going to name your minor kids. You're probably going to name your spouse and then your trust, at least until your kids are old enough when you feel like it would not damage their character or their life choices to come into a retirement account that they could completely liquidate and use. Usually for most of my clients, that's sort of mid to late 20s or 30s before, after they've gotten through college, they've gotten through school, and they've embarked on their own lives and know a little bit about handling their own finances. And, if you have an asset protection trust, then probably going to name the trust as the beneficiary because, yes, you'll probably want to name the trust as a beneficiary. And there are a lot of considerations that go into determining who is the best beneficiary. And some of those are legal, some of them are tax, and there may be a bit of push and pull or tug of war between those. And that's why it's always good to talk to both your lawyer and your financial advisor and maybe an accountant to make to prioritize what is most important to you and to make the best choices regarding naming beneficiaries based upon your priorities. So, the process is one in which you create your plan, but then you embark after the plan is created on changing beneficiaries. And that might look like going into your bank or communicating with your financial institutions, letting them know that you want to make a change of beneficiaries, and then actually submitting the form that you fill out yourself. Maybe it's submitting a certificate of trust to the financial institution, and then making those changes. But we always recommend for people for you basically to have your lawyer look over the changes that were made, and not just the changes that were made in your own handwriting or the forms that you submitted, but actually asking the financial institution for confirmation on a change in title or change in beneficiaries, and then providing that to your attorney so the lawyer can look it over and catch any irregularities or inaccuracies. Basically, if the forms were filled out wrong, many times the clients don't catch that. They don't know that. You're not aware of it. And so you go along thinking that everything is good when in fact it's not. So one of the things you should consider is working with an attorney who is going to take the time to actually go through your paperwork after all the beneficiary designations or title changes have occurred, to give it that third inspection, that third once over, to make sure that things are correct. Because when they're not, and people go along their lives thinking everything is good and they are not good, then once they pass away, it's too late to make any changes. And so what ends up happening is, the worst case scenario is not always probate. The worst case scenario is people forgetting to change their beneficiary designations, and maybe an ex-wife or an ex-spouse getting a life insurance policy, having somebody who's not even part of your life named on those beneficiary designations, and they end up getting assets that you really, really wanted to get to other people, like a current spouse or your children from your second marriage. I've seen it happen, and it can be quite painful and quite disconcerting. And of course, it can have that divisiveness in the family, some very hard feelings. Maybe promises were made or communications were made during lifetime that set some expectations that are not brought to fruition. And so, planning is partially about keeping family harmony, but of course making sure that you can touch the lives of the people that you love, both with your financial assets to make their lives better, but also to ensure that you yourself are making very intentional decisions. And so it can come as a huge shock when family members find out that the plan wasn't effectuated in the way they believed or had been told. And so it can have a really negative impact on keeping your family happy and loving and together. So a little bit about why, being really careful with retitling beneficiary designation changes is so important, but also making sure that you're having a triple check on those documents just to make sure that everything is correct in the way you want it. And if it's not, then making that correction now so that you're not living under this falsehood, this false sense of security that you really don't have. So thanks for tuning in to the Daily with Christine. Subscribe to our channel if you like our content, and let us know what you'd like to hear about, and I'll be happy to produce content about that. If you have some estate planning issues that are coming up or questions, you can always reach out to us. If you know you need to probably put a plan in place and you just haven't found the time, well, there's no time like the present. So we're always here to help and support you in any way we can. I know that we can put a powerful plan in place for you and your family. So let us know how we can help. And thanks again. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.